Assalamu alaikum. Suppose that you are a human resource officer in an organization, and this organization of yours is going through a period of cost cutting. You feel that there is a need of a qualified and skilled person who has to perform a certain set of duties, etc. But your boss has asked you not to hire anyone unless the hiring makes some difference. You feel that the hiring of a certain person with the qualities can make a difference. So in this case, you have to talk to your boss. So this is an act of negotiation. In the last lecture, we started negotiations. Negotiation is basically is a process in which two parties with some common interest or sometime with conflicts come together to resolve some issue or to reach some agreement. So this takes place within the organization, among the people of the organization or the firm, or it takes place between two organizations or more than two organizations whenever there is some conflict of interest. In the last lecture, we discussed in detail some of the strategies of negotiation, like win-win, win-lose, lose-win and lose-lose. And we also discuss personal styles, the styles of people with which they come to negotiate. We also discuss power, because use of power is there in the negotiation. We discuss this power is a very important factor, and people who have some power must exercise their power to resolve problems within the organization and with other people. Then we started with a 5-step approach, that with all the strategies, when we come to certain point, when we practically come to this negotiation situation, we apply a 5-step formula, and we discuss that this formula begins with planning, as planning goes with every type of communication. In planning steps, the most important thing is to clarify your own objectives. You clarify your own objectives, you think of the results that you want to achieve, you gather information, you also try to understand the stand of the other party, and you try to develop and maintain relationship with the other party, and you also try to consider the viewpoint of the other. So in planning step, you go through with this exercise by clearing your objectives. You also organize all the relevant information that you can have. You think of the points. Remember that this situation is a very technical one. Here you have to think very precisely, accurately. You cannot generalize things. You have to focus your attention. As I just said, this can take place within your organization and can also take place outside your organization with people of the other organization. Whatever the case, you have to make it result oriented. You have to achieve your objective. In most of the cases, you should try to reach some conclusion which is a win-win. It's acceptable to you and acceptable to the other party. And you have to follow up these results. So, in planning steps, you have to clarify your objectives, you have to understand the objectives of the other party, you have to organize the information, you have to gather the information, you have to exchange the information, and you have to understand not only your objective but the objectives of the other party, and you have to identify link and common ground. That is very important. Unless you reach some common ground, you and your opponent, you cannot think of having some decision at the end of the day. So anticipate the parties or other parties' likely response to the issue and prepare your answer. So in planning steps, you go through all these things, as I just said, about your objectives, their response, your response, the result, etc. After you have gone through this planning step, you switch over to the next step, that is discuss. Discuss basically is the practical, to think of the practical situation. I mean, what discussion will take place when you and your opponent or the other party is sitting together on the table and you are going to discuss the issue. Remember that you have some problem, some issue to resolve. So in that case, it's very important that you must set a communication climate by exchanging greeting. It should be an open communication climate. I mean, you should feel free and the other party should feel free. So whenever you are going into this stage of discussion, you have to set the communication climate by exchanging greeting and aim to establish trust and confidence. How are you going to do it? Remember that. I mean, how you think that you can establish trust and confidence? You cannot, remember that, establish this trust and confidence unless you think positively. Unless you know your objectives very well, you have made a very good homework of all the objectives of yours and objectives of the other parties. So to aim to establish trust and confidence, you have to think positively. Beside this, you got to be sociable. You have to establish a tension-free atmosphere. This is very important for discussion. I note any differences that can lead you any situation in which you don't reach some conclusion. Similarly, be very well prepared with the previous proceedings or with all the differences if there were any. Beside that, you have to listen, learn to listen very carefully. We'll be soon discussing this topic on listening, and you'll know that how important this topic is, equally important to oral communication. So go through all these steps. When you are going to discuss any issue, you have to set a very open climate of communication. You have to establish trust and confidence. You have to be sociable. You have to make yourself familiar with previous proceeding, and you have to listen very carefully. All these things will make that atmosphere a tension-free atmosphere. So when you have done all these things, you will be going into the practical situation. Here you are going to propose. In the discussion stage, you are going to propose. You are going to define the issue and specify in detail what you wish to resolve. You are going to link your objective with the other party's objective. So here you are going to deal with one. Maybe in such situation, you have more than one issues at hand. Remember that when you are coming across such a situation, it's better to deal with one issue at a time. If you try to engage with different issue, you won't be able to reach some conclusion. Whenever you are engaged in any sort of discussion, it's very important that you just sort out one issue at one time. So again, in negotiation, it's very important that you just resolve or deal with one issue. Try to keep to the point and avoid generalization. It has been observed, seen and discussed in different books that the failure in such a situation is because of dealing with more than one point at one time, or generalizing the things, or discussing more than one thing. Remember that when two people are discussing, they are trying to listen to each other. To make and this listening brings understanding. To know whether your understanding of other person's point of view is correct or not, it's better that you keep summarizing, or first you keep paraphrasing the point of view of the other party and then keep summarizing it. In this way, you will have a better understanding. Rather, both of you will have a better understanding. If you have misunderstood anything, this paraphrasing will tell the other party that they meant the same, or they meant something else. So in this case, not only you become sure of the other party's view, rather other party also has a chance to know whether you have understood them very well or not. Then you come on to the next stage, and that is negotiate the issue. So here you ask the other party that what do they want and what you want. So with this you start the negotiation. Here it's very important that you must collaborate with the other party and telling them your intention of resolving the issue. Here be very positive about one thing. Don't use such sentences which separate the people from the issue. For example, conditional sentences like if this happens, then this happens. So if you use these types of sentences, what are you going to do is that you are going to separate issues from the people. So try to generate as many options as possible, so that both parties should have room to negotiate. And again, throughout the whole process, keep summarizing your point of view. So when you keep summarizing your point of view, there is little chance of any misunderstanding. The last of this 5-step approach is confirm. When you have reached some solution, check it with the other part, whether they mean the same or not. So this is the last of the 5 steps. When you read this step, you just summarize the whole issue and know whether they also agree to it or not. Once your agreement is concluded, it's very important that you also go for follow-up. Follow-up is very important. As we said that sometimes it happens that after you have reached some conclusion and you have checked the negotiation and the result, you need to go for follow-up confirmation whether both the parties are still committed with it or not. This 5-step approach to negotiation will help you negotiate more effectively. Basically, the purpose of this is to help you negotiate your issues, your problems, etc. Remember, good negotiation strategies enable you to solve problems in such a way that both parties win. This is a win-win situation, not a win-lose or lose-win situation, or the fourth one where both the parties have a lose-lose situation. Another approach to this negotiation is called principal bargaining. Principal bargaining is the approach. It was given by Fisher and Ree in 1991. they develop a concept known as principal bargaining. This works well when a group of stakeholders have a common interest. It is an acknowledgement to work together for mutual outcomes, and it's the essence of this principal bargaining. This is the old Australian ethic of fair go. So in this type of negotiation, everyone is treated fairly and equitably. It has three criteria. Number one, it should be a wise agreement if possible. I mean, whenever there are negotiation, the negotiation should aim at a wise agreement. Number two, it should be efficient. And number three, it should improve or at least not damage a relationship. So these are the basic three criteria of this negotiation. The principal negotiation method takes time, energy and commitment. This is the problem of this negotiation. This method has four elements. Number one, people. Number two, interest. Number three, option. And number four, criteria. People. It emphasizes that when people are having this process of negotiation, they should be separated from the problem. I mean, when we are discussing, we have to think of the problem, not the people associated with it or who are having discussion over the issue. So it's a very wise approach. Sometimes we fail to resolve issue not because of the problem, just because of the people. So it very wisely separate people from the problem. Next thing to it is interest. It focuses on the interest, not on the position. So again, it helps people when we think that what is interest. So we go for interest rather than for the position. Number four is option, to generate a range of possibilities before choosing one. I mean, before narrowing down the options, we go for a range of possibilities and options before we reach one. Criteria, to ensure that results are based on some objective standard. So we always use some criteria. Before we go into any discussion, we set some criteria and then we say that it should go according to the whole negotiation process should go according to that criteria. To implement the principal negotiation method, you need to state your case clearly and persuasively, organize your fact well, be aware of the timing and speed of the talks, assess the other's needs properly, be sensitive to those needs, not be unduly worried by conflict, be committed to a win-win philosophy, have patience. Sometimes you settle less than your goal. So these are the principle of this principal bargaining approach, which is a very logical one. You must have seen that. It's very logical. It want to settle down the issue, keeping separate all the people involved in it. Sometimes it happens that when we are negotiating, we get some agreement which is the best agreement. Sometimes it happens that when we have some negotiation, especially the type of negotiation, these instance of negotiation that I just cited in the beginning, when you are going to have some problem within your organization regarding a negotiation and you have to talk to your bosses. So these two possibilities are always there. So we define them as BATNA. BATNA stands for best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If the person you are negotiating with, your manager or supervisor, you may have VATNA. So this VATNA stands for worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. These two possibilities are there. Either the negotiated agreement can be the best negotiated agreement, or it can be a worst negotiated agreement. Especially in case if you have to negotiate with people who are your bosses, or you are more concerned about the people than about the issue at hand. So in that case, you go for worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. You have to modify your objectives, or in some cases it happens that you don't even prefer not to negotiate than negotiate. So these situations are always there. Whenever you are negotiating with people, there are always these two situations. So far we have discussed different strategies regarding negotiation. So similarly, we have different negotiation methods like compromising, collaboration, competition, accommodation, and withdrawal or avoidance. These are different methods. When you are negotiating with other party, either you are compromising, it means you are going to settle differences through concession made by one or both parties. So this is a sort of a win-win or win-lose situation. Obviously, you know that when you are dealing with and when you are compromising, you are modifying your objectives, and the other parties also modifying their objectives. So in that case, the situation may be a win-win situation or a win-lose situation. In any discussion that takes place anywhere, this is always there. The compromise is always there. So second to compromise is collaboration. This is an ideal thing. It's a win-win situation. It involves people to cooperate to produce a solution which is satisfactory to both the parties. So it's a win-win situation. Similarly, we have competition. Competition leads to one party gaining advantage over others. So it is a win-lose situation. Accommodation. This is another method of negotiation in which only one party is willing to oblige or adapt to meet the needs of the other. So it produces a win-lose situation. Then we have withdrawal. Withdrawal is a lose-lose situation, avoidance. In this negotiation method, people try to avoid to reach some result. In fact, what they are doing is they are not ready to modify their objectives. So these are 5 methods of negotiation that always take place when you are having any negotiation. Negotiation requires skill by the negotiators. In any organization, this process of negotiation is always theirs. Certain issues have to be resolved, options have to be narrowed down, and there are always some interest of two parties, two individuals which are conflicting. So in this case, we have to talk together, discuss together, and for that matter, we have to negotiate with each other within our organization and outside our organization. And you have seen that what qualities are required to go with this process of negotiation. In your organization, several negotiation strategies and several styles can be possible. The basic purpose is to reach some conclusion. Some are very simple, some are very complex. Beside that, you need to know the personal qualities of the negotiator. Though we did discuss some of the personal qualities of the negotiator, but we need to recap those personal qualities. Number one, a good negotiator needs to be able to plan. So he should have the ability to plan. Planning is very important. As I just discussed, you must clarify your objective, their objectives. You have to think of certain options, certain possibilities. So this planning step is important. A person who is to negotiate must have the ability to plan. Then he should have the capacity to think clearly under stress. When you are about some issue, you are thinking of some issue and you are going for negotiation, you are likely to be under some stress. But if you don't have the capacity to think under stress, you cannot have any win-win situation in negotiation, because you fail to come up with your whole self. So you should have the capacity to think under stress. Then a negotiator must have the ability to be practical. A negotiator can't be a person who just think of things but is not practical. A negotiator is a thinker because he is to plan, but at the same time he is very practical. He thinks objectively. He is not an introvert, he is an extrovert person. He looks at the things practical angle. So beside this, important thing is also the capacity to communicate well. A good communicator is required for negotiation. A negotiator cannot be a person who does not have the ability to communicate well. So beside that, you should have the ability to act assertively and with integrity. Assertively, the word assertively is used here. In the previous lecture I did use this word assertively. Remember that the word assertively is used in its positive meaning. It's not used in a negative meaning. You're not, intimidating others. To be assertive doesn't mean to be intimidating. It means that being firm. Whatever you say, you have confidence and you know that you are right. And it's not only assertive, it's also to be honest. So when you are assertive, you also require to be honest. This quality should be with assertiveness, that you are very honest. Then you have the ability to identify the interest of each party. When you are negotiating, you have your objective, but you cannot reach any solution unless you are able to understand the objective of the other. So you should be able to identify your objective and others' objective. So it's about having a you attitude, to be in the place of the other party. So it's the ability to identify the interest of each party. Capacity to identify a standard. That's very important. Unless you have some standard, some criteria which you are using in your negotiation as a rule, as some regulation, you cannot solve this issue. And last but not the least, a good communicator has the ability and willingness to follow up. You must know that the results are met, so he is willing to follow up. So these are the qualities of a good negotiator. We have been discussing negotiation. Negotiation is a process in which two individuals or two parties discuss some problem, some issue, and try to reach some conclusion or resolve that problem. It requires certain strategies, it requires certain skills of the people who are negotiating. It requires understanding of the whole process. So whenever you are engaged in this process, you must know that you know all these rules. You are aware of the approach that is used in this process, and you are also aware of different aspects that we have been discussing. So with this, we finish our topic of negotiation here and switch over to the next topic, that is listening. Since it's quite close to this oral communication, we've been, in the last two lectures, we've discussed presentation and then negotiation. These two topics are related to oral communication. So listening is very important, but most of the people confuse it with hearing. It's very important that we must know the difference between hearing and listening. Before we go on to listening, let's discuss what is hearing. Hearing is a physical process. The ear receives stimuli or sensations and transmit them to brain. But these stimuli that you transfer to your brain are very fleeting. For example, you are listening to this lecture and there is also humming of the fan in the room. Children are just crying outside the room. There is some car, some bus honking its horn at the road. All these things are coming to you, and they are being transmitted to your brain, but they cannot be termed as act of listening, because they are just being heard. You cannot help hearing a sound, because the moment you are awakened, you hear a lot of sound. Hearing takes place automatically. Whenever we are awakened, our senses work. The moment you open your eyes, they will see something. But there is a difference between watching and seeing. The moment you are awakened, you will hear the sound. But there is a difference that you hear something very carefully and the hearing that comes to you without any intention. So, hearing is different from listening. Hearing takes place every time, but listening does not take place every time. We define it in these two, hearing and listening, into different way. We say that listening is an active process, while hearing is a passive process. You cannot help hearing anything, as I just said, whereas listening is an active process and you make it act, you make it happen. Listening refers to the interpretive process that takes place when you hear something, you listen something, you store it, you classify it, you label it. So, storing, classifying, labeling, etc., any piece of information is actually an act of listening. Listening is a very important skill. It's an active process. It does not just happen. You have to make it happen. A great time is spent on listening. There are certain purposes of listening. As a sender of a message, you want to listen to your receivers to know what he has understood of your message. As a receiver of the message, you are listening to the other person, and it allows you to understand their meaning. So, it's very important. You check accuracy of your understanding and the understanding of the others. So, listening has to be learned like any communication skill. There are a variety of listening skills that can be learned, and when we have learned these listening skill, we can be a very good listener. In all these acts of communication, especially which are concerned with oral communication, this is a very good quality of a good communicator, because unless you have this quality, the quality of listening, you cannot be a good speaker or a good communicator, as you will see when we discuss this listening in detail. So, we can say that listening has these qualities like attending listening, encouraging listening, reflecting listening, and active listening. These are different types of skills, listening skills. So, attending listening, we begin with attending listening. In attending listening, you focus on speaker by giving them your physical attention. When you are listening to somebody, you are using this skill. This is attending listening. And what are you doing in this skill? You are focusing on the speaker of the message by giving a physical response, physical attention. How do you give a physical attention to a speaker? You establish eye contact with your speaker. You make a certain body posture which shows that you are listening to somebody. you give proper feedback to the speaker. So in fact, the speaker feels that you are 100% attentive to him. So in fact, it's a type of feedback. So in attending listening, what you do it, you focus on the speaker and give him a full body response of your facial expression, of your eye contact, and of your body posture. So this is one listening skill. Another listening skill is encouraging listening. I mean, what do? You invite speaker to say more without pressurizing them to disclose their feelings or thought. You tell them that it's their choice. In certain situation, you will find that it's very important that you should gather information from others. In your working life, at workplace, every day you listen to people, you listen to your superior, you listen to your subordinates, you listen to your peers, and you need information. And for this, you have to develop in you this skill. You have to encourage others to tell you more, because you need information. So for this purpose, you need to give them minimal and brief responses. I mean, you just give them small responses while they are speaking. So these brief responses help the speaker to talk more. So in this way, you have more information, you gather more information. So this encouraging listening is another listening skill. Similarly, when you are listening to somebody, you need to give pause. When they are talking, they will have a break, and in this break, you just allow speaker time to consider and reflect and decide whether to continue speaking. So allow silence to the speaker. Use encouraging question, like you can use when, where, why, what, all that 5 W's, how and it. So this will help the speaker to say more. Then we have a reflecting listening. Reflective listening is that when you have listened to something, you need to restate the speaker's feeling and contents, so that the speaker may agree what he has said and should endorse what he has said, and should make your understanding of the speaker's message perfect. Then the last of it is active listening. Active listening has empathy. It's showing you attitude, empathy with the listener. That shows that you understand the issue from other person's point of view. So these are different skills that can be very helpful in this process of listening. But as all other types of communication have some problems, similarly this listening also has problem, and we have certain faults in listening. Whatever we listen, maybe in some cases is not very accurate. In fact, what happened is that an average person remembers only half of what is said during a 10-minute conversation, and half of that is again forgotten within 48 hours. So with this, you can imagine that we are left with very little memory of what we normally listen to. So listening needs to be very accurate. We need to develop this skill as much as possible. It has certain faults. We will discuss now the faults of listening. One of the fault is prejudice. All of us have personal opinion, likes, dislikes about different ideas, about different people. So if we are listening to a person who is talking about any idea, or whose opinion or even the personality of the speaker is not appealing to us or is not liked by us, it means that we are going to bear prejudice against that person. So whenever we have prejudice against any opinion, against any person, we are not going to listen that person properly. So as a result, listening actually does not take place. We do not understand the message properly. Second to this pitfall, prejudice, we have distraction. Sometime, rather in every act of communication, oral communication, some distraction is bound to happen. Not only the verbal messages, but also the non-verbal cues of the speaker affect our listening. Sometimes we feel that the way a person is making facial expression are distracting our attention, or there can be other factors, negative factors, such as noisy fan is going on in the room, there is poor light in the room, distracting background music, bang of the horn, extreme weather. So these are the non-verbal cues, and among these non-verbal cues are sometimes the way a speaker is dressed up. Maybe the speaker has worn a certain type of perfume, or there is a bad smell of sweat. So all these can distract us from this process of listening. Another type of barrier, listening barrier, can be semantic barrier. It means that we are unable to understand the meaning of a certain word. So as speaker, if you want other to understand you properly, you must not use those words which you can think that they are unable to understand. So it also happens that sometimes the way a speaker utters a certain word annoys other, and this becomes a barrier to listening. Another type of this barrier is pre-thinking. Remember that in every thinking capacity of a person is up to 800 words per minute, whereas a speaker utters word at a rate of 80 to 160 word. So when a speaker is using this rate 80 to 160 and the thinking capacity is 800 words, so sometimes it happens that the gap that takes place between listening process is filled with some thinking. I mean, the listener deviate from the listening process. Sometimes it also happens that the person listening to a speaker fill this gap with some premature evaluation of what he is going to listen. So this all happen. So this is also one of the deviation, one of the barriers of listening. Another can be boredom or lack of interest, and this again is a type of distraction. So it's very important that you must improve your listening. Listening can be improved, as I just discussed the different skills. So when you are going for this listening, you have to improve and use certain qualities. Be prepared by knowing the speaker and the topic beforehand. You can prepare yourself for better understanding of the topic. So this can improve your listening. Show positive attitude. Do not make a premature assumption, especially in that gaps when you are thinking at a rate of 800 and the speaker is speaking at a rate of 80 to 160 word. Always be ready to learn new ideas and facts so that you could listen. Listen to learn, not to refute. While listening, try to understand the points. Do not let them mix up with your biases, with your presumptions that you already have. Concentrate, pay attention to what is said. So all this can be very helpful when you are listening. So we have discussed listening. Listening is an active process. You have to make it happen. It's very important that you listen responsively. Basically, what listening give you a time to evaluate your ideas and check your accuracy your accuracy of the of some conversation, some act of communication that you are listening to. Listening is different from hearing. Hearing simply taking some stimuli to the brain, and this all is very fleeting. You, as I just said, that in a 10-minute conversation you forget half of it very soon, and half of that is forgotten in the next 48 hours. So whatever you listen is very fleeting. You have to be very attentive. You have to pay attention to the speaker. You have to develop in you an empathy. You could be able to understand, going into the place of your speaker. You should be able to cultivate in you the qualities which make you very good listener. So this is how you can improve this act of communication. As oral communication is very important for a good communicator, similarly listening is also very important for a good communicator. What is communication? It's an act of sending messages and receiving messages. As we have spent a lot of time in discussing the qualities with which you can send information as precisely, as accurately as possible. Similarly, as a receiver of the communication, you need to understand the communication as accurately, as precisely as it is sent. For this matter, you have to develop this listening skill. So for listening skill, you have to think of this listening skills strategies that we just discussed. This is how you can develop in you this quality of communication, and with this quality of communication you can be a very successful communicator at your workplace as well as in your routine life. So today we have discussed negotiation, some part of the negotiation that was a remnant of the previous lecture, and then we discuss listening. I know that we have not gone into details of this listening topic, but what we have discussed is sufficient to understand the importance of this act of communication, and I hope that you'll be able to develop in you the qualities, the skills of listening to be a good communicator. So with this, we finish our lecture of today, and we'll meet in the next lecture. Until then, Khuda Hafiz.